In the summer of 1998, Scotland's senior clubs established the Scottish Premier League amid promises of health and prosperity for all.
What was needed was a fresh start, because Scotland's game was going to hell in a handcart and did need a shot in the arm.
And the thinking was more money in, better quality of player,
greater competition on the pitch and greater entertainment value for supporters.
Virtuous circle. That was the plan.
The SPL had arrived bearing gifts, millions of them, thanks to a bumper television deal with Sky Sports.
There was this sense of millions of pounds swilling around the SPL system.
It was good for Scottish football, good for the clubs involved.
But within a year, that television deal almost brought the league to its knees.
The SPL project was based on the television deal, which after that league decider was more than touch and go. It looked go.
And in the hope of future television money and chasing European glory, the clubs ran up hundreds of millions of pounds of debt.
There were some clubs who did genuinely feel that they could compete in a way that really they didn't have the resources to do, and they overextended themselves.
Events since then have demonstrated that adopting the slogan "speculate to accumulate" is an extremely risky path.
At the start of the 1998-99 season, Rangers owner David Murray cleared out the old guard from Ibrox following a barren season.
Say hello and wave goodbye.
First Celtic lifted the League Cup. Then, on the last day of the season, as Rangers pursued their 10th league title in a row, Henrik Larsson inspired Celtic to the league championship. Even the consolation of the Scottish Cup was denied Rangers as Hearts came to Glasgow the following week to inflict Rangers' first trophyless season in 12 years. Murray's response was immediate, and he embarked on the most ambitious and expensive team-building programme in the history of Scottish football.
He had decided what he was going to do. He was going to spend. He was going to try and get into that next level in European football, because there was a feeling that football was about to polarise quite dramatically. So there was a lot of people saying, this is happening now. You're either in the big league or you're not.
As part of their quest to join that big league, Rangers officially unveiled former Holland and PSV Eindhoven coach Dick Advocaat as their new manager. Advocaat wasn't at Ibrox to win Scottish titles. He was there to win European Cups.
Rangers has done very, very well domestically. This has been a very exciting and rewarding era. The only area that none of us in Scotland have done well is Europe, and we feel that his coaching style may add and enhance that opportunity to do better in the future.
There was this sense of huge excitement. This big name was coming to Ibrox. Wee Dick, as we took to calling him, he won the title with PSV Eindhoven. There was great excitement.
Advocaat returned to PSV Eindhoven for his first signing, Arthur Newman. Despite offers from England and Spain, Newman chose Rangers. His close relationship with Advocaat persuaded him to come to Glasgow. But it didn't come just as a favour to a former manager.
I spoke to David Murray. He was very ambitious, and what he said, he wanted to sign a lot of good players to try to make an impact in Europe. I was the first signing, and I had to wait and see which other players would sign for Rangers as well. So I took a gamble.
He needn't have worried, because just a week after unveiling Newman, another Dutch international, Giovanni van Bronckhorst, joined Rangers from Feyenoord for a fee of £5 million. And while he and his countrymen gave Dutch television an introduction to the subtle nuances of Scottish culture, Rangers were finalising more transfer business. Following Van Bronckhorst into Ibrox were André Kanchelskis, French international goalkeeper Lionel Charbonnier, former Leeds United striker Rod Wallace, and Argentinian forward Gabriel Amato. Along with Romanian defender Daniel Prodan, they'd take Advocaat's spending to over $22 million in just 10 weeks. By contrast, Celtic opened the season without a single new face in their squad. And having to stand by and watch Rangers assemble a team of international superstars proved too much for a section of the Celtic Park crowd, who unbelievably turned on the board of directors on the day they celebrated their greatest triumph in a decade.
It's a particularly great pleasure and an honour for me to be here today.
They were unfurling the SPL flag, and Fergus McCann was booed by Parkhead.
Fergus McCann had worked wonders at Celtic Football Club. We were on our knees on and off the field. And Fergus came in and he stabilised the club, he injected finance, he put his money where his mouth was.
I remember saying to a few guys in the press box, you know, what is going on here? This guy has saved the club. He saved Celtic.
And for the fans to give them the reception they gave them that day, I think I was really shocked and very upset.
The following day, Sky broadcast their first live SPL match when Dick Advocaat took the most expensive team in the history of Scottish football to Edinburgh for their opening match of the season. Despite the controversial 6:05 Sunday evening kickoff, Tynecastle was full to bursting.
Many spare seats around this Sunday evening in Edinburgh.
In 1998, Hearts were unquestionably the third force in Scottish football. But armed with the broadcast of millions, Chairman Chris Robinson had genuine ambitions to make them the second team in Scotland.
The chairman felt that Hearts could have been a serious force, a third force. He ran Celtic very close to the league in '98 and he was looking to build on that. He felt he was within touching distance of the Championship and Champions League.
And Hearts have beaten Rangers by 2-1.
For Rangers, losing to Hearts on day one of the new regime was definitely not in the script. But what are checkbooks for if not to be used in time of crisis? Or in the event of an opening day defeat to Hearts? So 48 hours after losing at Tynecastle, Rangers called another press conference. Another day, another £4 million.
It's a lot of money, but we believe that Colin can bring a lot to this club.
The chairman, David Murray, had said that he wanted a very keen, good Scottish identity to the team as well, and I think on the back of captaining Scotland in the World Cup, I fitted the bill as far as that was concerned. Although there was a lot of foreign players being signed at that minute in time, that they gave the team a good Scottish identity.
Henry's debut in a Rangers shirt came in their first home match of the season against Motherwell. The Lanarkshire club had just been bought over by a local businessman, a Motherwell supporter who had big ambitions for his new club.
We wanted to give Motherwell a boost and we wanted to see how far our fan base could extend. We clearly suffer from a huge problem being located so near to Glasgow and so near to Rangers and Celtic, who suck all the fans from Lanarkshire into Glasgow, and it's a fairly substantial task to try and turn that tradition around.
Boyle invested heavily in the team, bringing in Scotland international goalkeeper Andy Gorham and spending £500,000 on John Spencer's transfer from Everton.
He felt that Motherwell could distinguish itself as an alternative to Celtic and Rangers and all that they represent, and become a local town that was vibrant, where the football club was the centre of the community, and he was prepared to invest in that.
Football is seductive, and to enter into a sport where competition is at its heart is a great thing, and you want to be successful. If you're a successful businessman, why can't you be successful in football business?
In keeping with the mood of the times, the new Motherwell owner was reported to have offered his players £5,000 per man to win at Ibrox. A late penalty denied Motherwell even a slice of their bonus. But with just 2 matches gone, the feeling was this new setup was going to improve the quality of Scottish football and lead to a more competitive league. But David Murray had more than Scottish football on his mind, and the first real test of Rangers' European pedigree would come in the shape of Germany's Bayer Leverkusen.
Van Bronckhorst, da ist es!
By the middle of November, Rangers had knocked Leverkusen out of the UEFA Cup, were in the final of the Scottish League Cup and were 10 points ahead of Celtic in the SPL. The fans had found a new hero.
They bought into the Murray dream and the Advocat dream because there were definite signs there that this was great fun. And Celtic were in a bad way at the time.
Before they could think about the League Cup final, Advocat had to take his team to Celtic Park. In many ways, it was like a visit to the poor relation. In 1998, the plan was to attract quality players to Scottish football. Their presence would attract more fans, generate substantial TV revenue, and eventually lead to European success. And nowhere was that more true than at Ibrox, where Dick Advocat's spending was approaching £30 million. But it seemed to be working. And going to Celtic Park in November, Rangers were comfortably ahead of the reigning champions.
We were playing well, and I think we were 10 or 11 points ahead of Celtic. And we were playing well, and then we went to Parkhead, and for me it was the first Old Firm, and of course I've been told about it. People, they approach you on the street, oh come on, get beat the opposition, and for me it was finally the opportunity actually to be involved in such an environment.
On paper, Rangers' visit to Celtic Park should have been a formality. By comparison with their free-spending visitors, Celtic had spent almost nothing, but would give home debuts that day to two players, a Swede called Mjällby and a 33-year-old Slovakian called
Moravcik! Tom Boyd is onside. Number 2 for Moravcik. For Henrik Larsson, it's number 3 this time. Get it clear though, it's from Philadelphia and Henrik Larsson. 4 for Celtic. Virgil is there as well. That's number 5. Well, you can almost paint in the black cloud overhead. Big Advocat.
For Rangers' Foreign Legion, this defeat was a sore one. For the fans, particularly the fans on the park like Glasgow boy Ian Ferguson, it was unbearable.
Ian Ferguson's first impact on the game is a free kick.
And then after the game, when I came in the dressing room, he was absolutely mental. He was yelling and shouting, and he was calling us names, and that we foreigners had no idea what it actually means to get beat against them. I think the manager, Advocat, he let him talk for a few minutes, because I think if he would have jumped in, then we would have had a big fight in the dressing room.
That's full time. Celtic are back with a bang.
It was a difficult day for anyone, but it was a short, sharp reminder as well that, you know, not to be disrespectful and not to take anything for granted.
And Celtic Park is bouncing.
It was probably a good kick up the backside for us.
Rangers were shell-shocked, and what's more, they'd have to return to the scene of the crime a week later to play St Johnstone in the final of the League Cup. But the omens were good for Rangers. They'd demolished St Johnstone just a fortnight earlier in the SPL, thanks to a stunning debut from another multi-million-pound signing, French international striker Stéphane Guivarc'h.
Here's Guivarc'h, chance to... Well, he's looking, he tries to chip the goalkeeper. Oh, that's an absolutely magnificent goal. The good ball in, there's Guivarc'h again, chance for another. 6-0 Rangers, Stéphane Guivarc'h.
The 7-0 game was an amazing game of football. My vivid memory of it is the next morning I sat down with the players and I said, we're going to watch this video, the video of the game, because I felt at the time we were actually playing quite well in the game. We get sorely punished. There's no question about that.
7-0. This indeed is exhibition stuff from Rangers.
I remember before we played them in the cup final, and you think, well, I don't think this can go wrong.
In the final at Celtic Park, St Johnstone went toe-to-toe with the millionaires of Govan. They lost an early goal to that man Guivarc'h again, and must have feared a repeat of that 7-0 thumping earlier in the month.
He can cut it back, can he? Guivarc'h!
But within a minute, they were level.
There's Dasovic. Oh, it's a great equaliser.
Before finally losing out to a Jorg Albertz winner.
It's a beautiful move as Albertz comes in. Oh, yes.
After the game, that I got a big hat and a big flag or whatever, and I was running on the park like an idiot. But also the fact that I was probably happy that finally we won our first trophy, and it was also for us the first step towards the treble, because that's what we had in our mind before the start of the season.
Lorenz Amoruso with the cup.
It took away a little bit the pressure as well, because David Murray, they invested an enormous amount of money in players, and of course you want to reward him by winning trophies.
For St Johnstone boss Sandy Clark, whose entire budget wouldn't amount to Dick Advocaat's loose change, defeat was painful.
I felt really quite flat and alone. When you look back on it, for a lot of the guys, it was their only National Cup final, and that was maybe the one chance for a bit of glory, and unfortunately we just couldn't do it on a day.
For Rangers, their hope and indeed expectation was that this would be the first of many trophies that season. Celtic's challenge had been short-lived, the 5-1 game being more of a blip than a revival, as Celtic lost at Tynecastle and drew with Dundee United in consecutive weekends. By the end of December, not only was Celtic 10 points adrift in the league, but they'd also crashed out of the UEFA Cup. By contrast, Rangers were flying high in the league and progressing well in the UEFA Cup. After a 1-1 draw with Parma in Glasgow, Rangers went to Italy and took the lead.
Good chance this is for Jorge Albertz. Albertz scores for Rangers.
Rangers were cruising until
Sergio Parini will be sent off here.
in the second half, the roof caved in.
It's beyond Niemi, headed back across. That's the equaliser. In from Chiesa, Albert's header, shooting opportunity. And Fiore scores for Parma. The pass for Chiesa. A handball used by Lorenzo Amoruso.
Moment of stupidity, in my opinion.
Rangers' Italian imports hadn't exactly covered themselves in glory on their visit home.
Here's Chiesa. And that must surely be the moment this UEFA Cup tie is lost for Rangers.
Everybody can make mistakes. We all understand that. We all know that. It's just that if you're not allowed to make too many mistakes, and unfortunately for Lorenzo, and I think Sergio Parini as well, on that day, the two Italian boys back in Italy, it was a bit of a bad day for us.
Rangers reacted to that defeat by Parma as only Rangers could. They spent money on players. In 1 week in December, Stefan Klos arrived from Borussia Dortmund and Neil McCann joined from Hearts for a combined fee of just under £3 million. They may have been out of the UEFA Cup, but they hadn't given up on their European ambitions.
Obviously, Dick Advocaat was looking to bring top-level players to the club and go on to the next step, Champions League football, and he's seen me as part of that. And that's how Mr Advocaat had spoken to us as well. Didn't see me as coming into the club as a squad player. He wanted me to come in and play a big part in his team. And like the season panned out, hopefully I did that.
And here's a big moment for Neil McCann.
Ironically, just days after leaving Hearts, McCann returned to Tynecastle for his Rangers debut, starring in a 3-2 win as Rangers sought revenge for that opening day defeat.
Play from Albertz, releasing Rob Wallace. This could be dangerous for Hearts. It is.
By the end of 1998, the SPL was delivering everything it had promised.
What we said on the tin we were going to do, we were doing, and the crowds were coming. The season before, I think the average gate was weekly was around 12,000, and we were up to 18,000. So there was excitement being generated, the fans were loving it, and were coming.
When you look at the football that was in the park, the players that were on the park were fantastic, and the quality of the football was unprecedented. The downside was we're doing it all on borrowed money. They didn't actually have the money to afford those players, but at the time it was fantastic.
On the surface, it appeared that everything the SPL had wished for the domestic game was bearing fruit. There was a galaxy of foreign stars plying their trade in Scotland, while a multi-million-pound TV deal gave Scottish football worldwide media exposure, and by January 1999, the league itself was remarkably competitive.
Beautiful goal!
Kilmarnock were the nearest challengers to Rangers, with Celtic 6 points further adrift in third. The SPL really seemed to be Scottish football's promised land, but establishing a home there proved to be very costly, as the fear of banishment from that promised land became an all-consuming terror.
If you are relegated from the SPL, you are in hell. And, you know, that was the fact of life, and that is why they all overspent, because they were so terrified of it.
Relegation is, for any clubs, especially those on the smaller turnover levels, is almost Armageddon.
In order to stave off relegation, clubs spent money they didn't have on players and players' wages. The clubs had developed a taste for the broadcasters' millions and seemed to believe that with future television deals, there was a bottomless pit of cash from which they could draw.
We were bringing players from all over Europe, actually, to try and stay in the league. Some of them were good, but a lot of them were dumplings. And with enough of them without bringing them in from abroad.
Players who couldn't get games for clubs in their own top divisions would end up in Scotland and end up getting reasonable wages for this, often I think because they just had a foreign name.
The major factor in pushing up the wage bill was the 1995 Bosman ruling.
It's time now for sport, and Jim's here with major changes in the world of football tonight.
Indeed, Viv, football's transfer system is set for a major overhaul after an interim ruling by the European Court of Justice. This is the Belgian footballer whose test case looks to have altered every economic theory relative to professional football.
Bosman said, I'm at the end of my contract, you don't need to pay me a transfer fee. So everyone thought, wages will go up, fair enough, but that'll be compensated because we don't need to pay transfer fees.
But if that was supposed to happen, someone forgot to tell the SPL chairman. They continued to pay transfer fees and massively inflated salaries. If a club hoped to break even, their wage bill should never be higher than 60% of their turnover.
Some went as high as about 130%. So for every pound that's coming through the turnstile, every pound of income, there was £1.30 being spent on wages. That equals a loss, never mind all the other costs you've got.
The disparity between wages and turnover was just unsustainable, and everybody was guilty of it at the time.
We overpaid in wages, overpaid in transfer fees, and certainly the optimism surrounding the new TV deals caused many of us, for a short period of time, in Motherwell's case, I have to say, to spend more than they probably should have.
People in football tend to be ambitious, of course. They dream of winning trophies and prizes, and there were some clubs who did genuinely feel that they could compete in a way that really they didn't have the resources to do, and they overextended themselves.
I don't think there was any long-term worries because we had a long-term TV deal, and with every indication that that was going to continue.
I think money was being spent with the view that, don't worry, we'll get this equation right again when this additional TV money flows through.
It was a house built on sand to a degree, because it was heavily reliant on Sky.
One of the few clubs who refused to follow the herd in racking up debt in blind faith of future television income was St Johnstone.
I would say St Johnstone was probably the best run club in the SPL, and basically put that down to the chairman. He was a very shrewd man, still is a very shrewd man in business terms as well as in football terms. And, you know, I think the best thing you can say about Jeff Brown even now, a lot of years later, is that, you know, whenever he speaks, people listen.
And I remember very clearly huge amounts of angst and anger from Jeff Brown about how these people were taking the market into difficult areas of value. But football's always been like that. It is run badly and it doesn't make profits because it runs to the pace of the most reckless operator.
and setting the pace on the park were Rangers. On April 4th, the Dick Advocaat Roadshow rolled into Perth en route to the inaugural SPL title. Rangers seemed unstoppable, 9 points ahead of second-place Celtic and coasting.
There's the hit flick, and it's a goal for St Johnstone! Up goes Dasovic, heads it down, nobody there. There's a chance again, Sameo, it's in the net! Miguel Sameo has scored for St Johnstone!
I think it was payback time. We were obviously vying for third place, and Rangers were trying to win the championship. So, you know, there wasn't a Rangers team of reserves and not trying or that type of thing. It was a competitive football match. And my memory of the game is we're 2-1 up and hanging on, really hanging on to praying for the final whistle.
This is a chance for St Johnstone to seal the victory. McAlesty's got a chance. It's a goal for St Johnstone. 3-1, game over.
And that was a proud moment for me, and I think everyone connected with the team.
Despite that defeat, Rangers were still red-hot favourites for the title. But just to make sure, they unveiled another multi-million-pound signing. United States captain Claudio Reyna. He made his debut when Rangers faced Dundee at Tannadice, home of city rivals United.
This time to head it down, it's in the back of the net, Tony Benmar!
That 1-1 draw was to have enormous unforeseen consequences for the future of the SPL. But the real drama was happening off the park, as Dundee's new owners were finalising the most important deal in the history of Dundee Football Club. Lifelong fans Jimmy and Peter Marr had bought the club in 1997 and returned Dundee to the top flight of Scottish football in time for the launch of the SPL.
The Marr brothers, who took over in 97, were business people, successful business people with some money, but they didn't have huge fortunes.
I spoke to Peter and Jimmy Marr, and I'm still really friendly with them. And I said to them, I says, honestly, you look as if you're coming up this year. I says, but I'm warning you, do not throw money at a football club. I says, because you would be as well throwing it in a big hole. I says, you'll never see it again.
At the start of the SPL, there were implications there that Dens didn't meet the SPL requirements. They wanted to be in the upper league, but they also knew it would cost even more money. They were losing money even when they were getting promoted. So there were big stakes.
I had to be really hard with them in the first year because they didn't have their stadium, and I had to threaten them with being expelled from the league. But it pushed them towards merger with United. I was in the middle of this with Jim McLean and the Mars, and that merger was just about done. There was the name. There was the strip they would play in. There was everything.
It would be far better for Dundee and Dundee United if there was only one club in Dundee, in my opinion. I apologise to either the Dundee or Dundee United supporters for saying that.
The name? Dundee United City. And they played in Tangerine.
But as rumours swept the city of the impending merger, a backlash by fans persuaded the Mars that this was a step too far. Dundee Football Club survived to sink another day. But the consequences of their draw with Rangers meant that Dick Advocaat's men could now win the title at Celtic Park. For the new broadcaster, it was a dream end-of-season climax. But, argued the police, the circumstances of this particular match made it a recipe for disaster. Not for the first time, the Glasgow Police got it spot on.
Sky wanted 6:05 kick-off because that was what suited Sky's schedules. It was clear the police had some reservations about that.
There were concerns because it was a bank holiday weekend and the game was played on a Sunday at 6 o'clock, and of course the Monday was a day off.
I don't think anybody particularly liked that time. But of course, if you take the money from the television broadcasters and you need the money, then you're going to try to adapt to their needs.
And so there was the potential, at least, for excesses, shall I say, and misbehaviour.
You had this atmosphere of all-day drinking. The fans roll up to Parkhead. There's resentment already there because Advocaat and Rangers are about to win the title.
Going into that game, we knew that we could achieve something magic, and and our style of play would allow us hopefully to do that.
When you go as a team to Parkhead and you play against your arch rivals and you can actually win the league, that means something special, because for them there's nothing worse than see your arch rivals winning the game and actually lifting the trophy.
The hope was that the match would pass off without incident. The fear was that it would descend into chaos. Scotland held its breath. Rangers took the lead after 12 minutes.
And it's in, Rangers have opened the scoring!
In a match Celtic simply could not afford to lose, the pressure got a little bit more intense. And after 31 minutes, the lid blew off.
He is off. Now he has been sent off. There's no hesitation with Hugh Dallas there.
A goal down, a player down, the league was lost.
Well, here's a Celtic supporter trying to get at the referee. The Celtic supporter's irate.
Just before half-time, the referee was hit by a coin thrown from the home support.
Celtics are raining down now, and there's another supporter, come on. I have been at many an Old Firm game. I don't think I've seen anything quite like this.
And seconds later, he awarded Rangers a penalty.
He did well, and that's a penalty kick. Possibly put Rangers 2 up, and he has.
McCann added a third with 15 minutes left to seal an emphatic win.
In goes McCann, he's gone round the outside, he could do it here, he's done it!
In the closing stages, Rangers' Wallace and Celtic's Reeseth were both sent off. Rangers had won the match and the league title.
And the referee brings the game to an end. Rangers are Scottish champions.
To win the league at Parkhead, anybody that was there that day found it one of the best days of their lives.
I remember at the end of that game, Advocat doing this almost religious thing. This is what Advocat did. Almost Ayatollah-like. I can still picture him walking towards the Rangers fans and this baying mob, paying homage to Advocat. And Bert van Lingen crying, actually. Bert van Lingen was given to ludicrous bouts of emotion. Bert van Lingen was in tears that afternoon because it was such a great achievement. Advocat was untouchable, and it summed up that evening at Parkhead.
While Rangers and their fans celebrated, the SPL executive went into crisis management mode. The police, the media, and even member clubs within the SPL said never again to a Sunday 6:05 kickoff. But no 6:05, no Sky deal. No Sky deal, no money. It was the worst possible advert for Scottish football. The climax to the first SPL championship had descended into chaos. Rangers' title win had been overshadowed by the violence during and after the match. The overwhelming consensus said, never again.
The SPL project was based on the television deal. The television deal on May the 3rd was touch and go. More than touch and go. It looked go. So I had to sit with Sky and try and work out a solution.
In a deal with league officials, Sky TV has switched kick-off times from 6:05 to 12:30.
In the months and years that followed, the SPL, buoyed by the success of their kick-off time negotiations, began to examine their options for securing another bumper TV deal.
We employed a media advisor to give us a valuation of our rights, and it was an extremely high number. It was a multiple of the deal that we had from Sky at the time.
Timing, however, is everything. And between the SPL internal valuation of its own worth and the opening of negotiations, the world had changed dramatically.
The dot-com boom ended. Then the Twin Towers took us into quite a bad recession. NTL and ITV Digital disappeared as potential bidders, so Sky was left with the terrestrial players.
Worried by the lack of an alternative bidder in the negotiations with Sky, the SPL executive discussed the possibility of starting their own television channel.
My recollection was that the concept of an SPL TV channel was partly generated by the feeling that if we did our own thing, then it might be important in leveraging the Sky bid up.
It was interesting to explore, to use as a stalking horse, for want of a better term. And that was how the ball began to roll.
And the ball picked up speed when the SPL were offered the same amount of money for the next 4 years as they were receiving from their current deal.
They were told that bid would probably not find a welcome with the clubs, and that the clubs were looking at an alternative of their channel. And Sky said, well, if that's what you're going to do, our offer's withdrawn. The bid was off, and nobody really thought that was a first and final bid.
We all budgeted with a TV deal continuing. It was obviously a big shock in Scotland when that deal, wasn't renewed.
That instant withdrawal left the SPL with nowhere to go, and what began life as a negotiating tactic quickly became their preferred option.
From November through to the April, we were planning the SPL television venture. It was well thought out, well founded, it could have been financed, and we had every expectation that we would have our own TV station generating good revenues under our own control from 2000 to 2003.
I think the feeling of the Celtic board at the time was, well, it may fly, let's see what it amounts to. So we took part, I would say, in good faith in the discussions.
The final meeting of the clubs, all 12 clubs to vote on this, had 10 voting for and 2 voting against. That meant that the proposal didn't go through.
Sadly, Celtic and Rangers, who had given every indication during all these extensive preparations over months that they would support the venture, suddenly, arbitrarily, without any notice, withdrew support and left the SPL floundering for a television deal.
Top stories in Scotland today.
Scottish football faces a blackout as SPL TV gets the big switch off.
We felt as a football club that, having done the due diligence, that some of the projections in terms of subscriber numbers were vastly opportunistic.
We saw enough flaws in the contract of finance, of assumptions about subscription levels, about the price of subscription levels, about migration from Sky viewers to the SPL TV contract, the legal side. It was just bristling with problems.
We asked the executive to go back to the other broadcasters or to the broadcasters and try and renegotiate and open up and expand talks, and it wasn't done.
There was some very dramatic infighting going on that never saw the light of day.
You had the prospect of a breakdown in the league structure, 10 saying they were going to resign, and I had to work exceedingly hard during that period to bring them back together.
The resignations didn't materialise, but neither did a multi-million-pound television deal. The debt mountain built up on the promise of increased TV revenue loomed Everest-like over the SPL. Something had to be done.
We had absolutely no option but to put the club into administration to protect a long-term future.
We have tried everything in our power to turn it round, but the club cannot continue to trade insolvently. The directors have legal obligations, and if there were a better course of action available to us, we would have taken it.
I think John Boyle at Fir Park was like a lot of these guys who looked at the money coming in from Sky, thought the gravy train looked quite good, and Motherwell were on it, I suppose.
Another club who eventually succumbed to administration was Dundee. Someone somewhere thought that allowing Dundee Football Club to amass over £20 million of debt made business sense.
It wasn't just the collapse of TV money that did for Dundee, it was the relentless buying of European and South American players to try and improve the team's performance, which he did in a way, and try and sell them on, which he didn't.
I mean, if you talk to the fans of Dundee, they loved that period.
Marvellous players. It was great for them, but for the owners of the club, it was a disaster in terms of not being able to pay the bills.
I remember towards the end of the Mars reign being at Firhill and counting the number of Dundee fans, and there were, 100 or something, and £20 million had been lost on that.
Hearts managed to avoid going into administration, but in their quest to qualify for the Champions League, they too racked up debts of almost £20 million. But as long as they were winning things, no one really cared.
I always remember Chris Robinson at Hearts, who was the chairman at the time, telling me this story that kind of summed up this age. He said, we were losing £200,000 a month. It went on at one point to Hearts losing £250,000 a month. And Chris Robinson said, I got cheered. I got applauded. The club had won the Scottish Cup. Great achievement. But you knew underneath things were not looking good and things wouldn't be good. But he said, I got cheered.
Throughout the lifetime of the Sky deal, the combined net debt of the SPL clubs rose steadily. By 2002, it was an eye-watering £145 million. 12 months later, it peaked at £185 million. One club who refused to run up huge debt was St Johnstone. They finished third in that first SPL season and qualified for the UEFA Cup. But in the seasons that followed, they lost players to clubs who were prepared to rack up debt, and they were eventually relegated.
Yeah, it was frustrating, no doubt about it. I had a lot of players at St Johnstone. John O'Neill's a great example for me. They got offered a lot of money to go to Hibs, and we just couldn't compete. And that happened with a few of the guys. There was a lot of clubs chasing that dream, and I knew they were doing it, couldn't do anything about it. Probably eventually cost me my job, but I still wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go down that road where you're again back to spending money you haven't got. As I said, a lot of clubs, they tried it, and it cost a lot of people a lot of money.
Back in that summer of 1999, mounting debt seemed not to be a concern at Ibrox. Bankrolled by David Murray's millions and under the guidance of Dick Advocat, Rangers were just one match away from a domestic treble. We've come a long, long way together. They'd face Celtic in the final of the Scottish Cup.
It was a big game for both clubs because that meant that we'd win the treble in Dick's initial season and the new regime, And it was a massive day for Celtic as well because that would have meant them not having won anything that season.
The 1999 Tennent Scottish Cup final gets underway.
The confidence in the dressing room was sky high because the whole season we were so strong. It was important to get a result, beat Celtic, win the Scottish Cup and win the treble.
Wallace. And Robles again! That's the breakthrough!
We started the campaign with a completely new squad of players. And actually then to get a team together who win the treble in the first season, that was absolutely fantastic.
The final whistle goes. Rangers have won the treble. I have to celebrate you, baby.
That occasion was magic because it was another Scottish Cup win. Where I became one of the first players to win back-to-back Scottish Cup wins with different clubs. So that was quite a special moment for myself as well.
We had to go back to Ibrox and get the party there when the players came back and celebrate in front of the supporters. But that whole game and that whole experience, it was absolutely mental, and I don't think a lot of the Rangers supporters who were there will ever forget it.
Probably on the day we did deserve to win the cup, and over the season probably did deserve to win the treble as well. So, it was money well invested, I think, from the chairman's point of view.
The chairman's substantial investment and Dick Advocat's managerial ability had secured Rangers the domestic treble. In the 18 months that followed, as Rangers chased their dream of European success, David Murray would spend a further £35 million. It's a bittersweet symphony that's life. But the higher you fly, the further the fall when it finally comes. And eventually, the bills have to be paid. Rangers' debt peaked at £74 million and a dramatic downsizing at Ibrox followed.
If David Murray was guilty of one thing, it was overambition. Murray thought Rangers could make an impact in the Champions League. And to be fair, looking back on it, Rangers and Advocaat were a little bit unlucky.
It was a time when World Cup winners, Champions League winners and international superstars graced the Scottish Premier League. But the economics of it didn't add up, and it couldn't last.
When you look back now, it became mad. The SPL went into incredible debt, hundreds of millions of pounds of debt, and you knew then that there was a car crash coming somewhere down the line. But at the time, football reporters and football commentators aren't business analysts. We thought it was great fun.